Today we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green is a green ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a D-like alpha with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we look at the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. We see this kind of grayish color that pushes its way up. It did create a line on the bottom, going immediately in the water, which shows a little bit of permanence. It reminds me in that of Diatramentis, although I'm not trying to figure out who's making their inks. It pushes its way up. We see the yellow, very bright yellow, and then this highlighter blue. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now that gray that was along the bottom is very dark, and there, that line seeped in. It pushed not nearly as far up. The yellow didn't go as far up, nor did the blue. But it basically, once it's moving, looks incredibly similar. It's the line on the bottom that makes you say there's going to be some resistance for this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself fairly well. I actually expected this to become a little bit more green based on the chromatography, and it didn't. I expected, I thought there was going to be maybe become some more vibrancy. That didn't happen. It handled itself well, though, well enough for me to say I would use it as a note taker. It doesn't become unreadable or blown out. Now, the water test, that gray is very there. It did not remove any of that gray from the paper. Pen Flush started to break some of that gray up, but there's still a lot of it left there. Now, this is only 30 seconds, but that gray is really worked its way into the paper. 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it from the paper. Now, there's a little bit of yellow staining onto the paper, which is common from the bleach. But I think you might need to be using that 1/3 bleach solution in this because of the permanence of that gray. If you do have to use the 1/3 bleach solution, then it's time to immediately wash your pen out. Don't rust your pen for this. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green has a viscosity of 2.03, making it a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green has an average dry time of 8 seconds, which is very fast. Probably so fast mostly because of that gray that really was getting into the filter paper. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form. You can see it's basically gone. To keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's talk about this sample bottle. It is so inconvenient. I mean, look at, you really can't, get that ink out of there very well. It makes an incredible mess to deal with. No, sir, I don't like them. I like this ink. I do not like their sample bottles. I have come to that very hard, fast opinion on that. I don't like them. but I like some of their inks. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, look at that beautiful tone. Very nice light green, just beautiful. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It's got some pretty shading going on. Very pretty. Looking across Birmingham, you see it starts dark, it's working its way lighter. The I gets dark again, it works its way lighter. Very light at the G, very dark at the H, light at the A, dark at the M. Out of focus. I have to go to manual focus because this camera is not enjoying the color of this ink, even though I do. So the 1.1 is amazing in what it's doing. Now the extra fine is a darker tone than the 1.1, significantly darker than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it offers some pretty shading throughout. Just as pretty as what we saw with the 1.1. Brown starts nice and dark, works its way light. The N gets dark into the middle of the N and then light again. Jumps, starts light, works its way very dark. Over, starts light, works its way very dark. Beautiful shading here. 5 seconds to dry. Now the medium becomes a much darker tone than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it still has that beautiful shading. The starts as a nice mid-tone, becomes very dark. Brown starts dark, works its way very light. Very, very nice. And it's like that all over. Over starts as light, gets dark, gets light, gets dark again. Quick is a super dark word all the way through. And 7 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine, looking far left to far right, you see plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. The scrubby of the medium showed us none, but we got much more. We got much more in the writing sample. The smear test says you could likely recover this if you smeared while you were writing. My dryer's telling me that my clothes are dry. I'll get to those in a minute. The Tomoe River. No bleeding, very minor ghosting. I mean, you look at it, and it's not too bad with the extra fine to 1.1. The medium gives much more, which makes sense when you turn the paper over. The 1.1 has no feather, spread. It has haloing. Beautiful haloing. No sheen, and no real shading here. And that's okay. The halo makes it all worthwhile. The extra fine is a noticeably darker tone than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread. It has haloing all over it. I don't get to see halo a whole lot with the extra fine, but if I'm going to get to see it, I get to see it on Tomoe River. It's got no sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine. So we get 3 totally different tones here. The medium has no feather, spread. It has halo all over it. Beautiful. Beautiful halo. No sheen, no shade, 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. I mean, on camera, the extra fine looks like it has it left to right. In person, I don't see it. And we don't see it in a writing sample. The medium shows none and we got none. The smear test, you could not recover this if you smeared it. But the scrubby shows the haloing that I got in both the writing, or all 3 of the writings. Very nice. Rhodia. Rhodia has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has some very nice shading in it. Like in Schenley, the EN is darker than the H or the L. Up in Birmingham, that GH, where I really goofed it, is a bit darker than the rest. Let's see here. Fix some of that. There we go. Thicket, in the circle of the K, much darker. The T is much darker. So we get some nice shading in the 1.1. The extra fine is a noticeably darker tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it has some very pretty shading. The starts light, gets dark, gets super dark. Quick starts dark, gets light, and gets very, very dark at the K again. Brown starts very dark and works its way light. Fox starts light and works its way dark. It is beautiful to watch this happening. It's not that camouflage shading that I love so much, but this is very nice. 6 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine, so 3 different tones here. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it still offers some shading. Not as much as we saw with the extra fine. More that we get spots that are lighter.
Like inside fox, the top of the F is lighter than the rest of fox. Inside dog, the loop of the D in the beginning is lighter than the rest of the word. The T in the is lighter than the rest of the word. Z in lazy is lighter than the rest of the word. So we get some shading in spots that are a bit lighter. It took 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. The scrubby of the medium shows none, but we did get some here. Now the smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. This is original Crown Mill. It's a nice laid paper. While it's a nice laid paper, just a couple spots on the medium. Now, I don't pay any attention to the scrubby because I'm putting it down stupid thick. But we get some spots with the medium that it is coming through some. But it's not coming all the way through. It's just that it's seeping deeper into the page. We have no real bleed through. It doesn't touch the page on the back. This would not stop me from using the back of the page. And there's no ghosting. The 1.1, beautiful light green. Beautiful light green tone. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it's got some nice shade spots. Now, I don't always see a lot of shading on original Crown Mill, but here we do get some. Like the H in Birmingham is much darker. The right side of the B is much darker. The K in Park, the H in Thicket, K in Thicket, T in Thicket, the G and one of the E's in green, all much darker than the writing around it. The extra fine, darker tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and beautiful shading. Brown starts nice and dark, works its way light. Fox is a dark to light to dark word. Very nice. Lazy starts dark and works its way light. Right in the middle of the Z, it gets nice and light. The starts light, dark, and then lighter again. 4 seconds to dry. Now, medium is a much darker tone than the the extra fine. Medium had no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shading here. 5 seconds to dry. When I look at the scrubby of the extra fine, I see plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. And the medium showed none, and we got none. The smear test you could likely recover if you smeared while you were writing. Franklin Christoph. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no real shading. Like, I think the word green looks slightly darker than the word thicket. But But it doesn't look it when I do that. Oh, we're on manual focus here. Hold on. It doesn't do that. It doesn't look it when I do that to it. It looks the same tone there. So that could just be a trick the eye plays. Got to go back to manual or the camera's going to freak out. So I don't really want to say that there's shading there. The extra fine is a darker tone slightly than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen. There is shading that comes through, like in the CK where it wound up being very thick in my screwed up writing. Brown starts dark and works its way light. Fox starts dark, gets light, gets dark again. The Z in lazy is darker than the rest of the word. The H in the darker than the rest of the word. Nice shading. Don't always get a lot of nice shading on the Franklin Christoph paper, and here we did. 5 seconds to dry. The medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade. 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby of the extra fine shows plenty of color variation, and we do get it. Scrubby of the medium shows none, and we got none. And the smear test, you could probably recover this if you smeared while you were writing. And White Lines paper, which did very well with the 1.1 and the extra fine. The medium had some bleed spots, but it does not touch the page underneath. It does not make the back of the page unusable to many people. I wouldn't use the back of the page if I was using a medium, but an extra fine, sure. No real ghosting, though. Look at that. I mean, the medium has it. I'm looking at the extra fine, the 1.1, no ghosting. Medium, some ghosting. So your mileage may vary depending on your pen. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shading. The extra fine is a darker tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen. There's spots of shading that are going on, like the K in quick, the B in brown, the AZ in lazy. The word the is much darker than the word over. It only took 3 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a much darker tone than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shading, 4 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows plenty of color variation, and we got plenty of color variation. The scrubby of the medium shows none, and we got none. And the smear test, you could definitely recover this if you smeared while you were writing, and that is all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I really, instead of a complement, wanted a hard contrast to this. I went with Private Reserve's Tanzanite Blue for a very hard contrast between this green and that blue. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Schenley Park Thicket Green? This green shades well, and you get a different tone in every nib and flow of pen. It's a lot of variety of green in this green ink. I think this might be one of Birmingham Pen Company's best inks, by far their best green ink. Thanks for watching.